Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to the next part of the M20 set review with the black cards. Sorry for having taken so long. I was very busy with the Eternal Worlds preparation and playing in the Eternal Worlds, so I didn't really get to it until now. It's unfortunate because it pushed the review even further back, but I hope you guys are still interested in hearing some of my thoughts on the new cards regardless, even though there's a lot going on with the cards on Arena already. But yeah, we'll take a look, and before we dive into the black cards, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content. Alright, so first we have Sauron, Impious Bloodlord. First of all, 3-cost Planeswalker that basically has 4 base loyalty plus 1 from either of the activations. Means that he is a 3-cost 5 loyalty Planeswalker, making him very durable, especially because both plus abilities have decent defense potential. And the -3 ability lets you cheat a big expensive vampire into play as well, like for example the 5-cost vampire that lets you draw cards equal to the amount of vampires and stuff like that. So pretty flexible and powerful, a huge push towards vampires, and we have a bunch of good vampires, at least until the format rotates from Ixalan block, so there's probably going to be a pretty good vampire deck at least until the rotation, and Sauron is going to be a big part of it. In Limited, I think it's not that great because you need quite a bunch of vampires for it to do a whole lot, and without vampires he doesn't really do much. Like the first +1 only gives like Death Touch and Lifelink, which is okay. The second one basically doesn't do anything without vampires, and the third one doesn't do anything without vampires, and even not that much with a lot of vampires in Limited. So in Limited this seems pretty meh. Next we have the Black Cavalier, Cavalier of Night. It's a 4/5 lifelink, which is pretty solid. The first ability, like the enters the battlefield trigger, means you get to sacrifice a creature to kill an opposing creature. So not that great here. You can just generate some quality advantage by trading your worst and cheapest creature with their best and most expensive creature, generating some tempo and some quality advantage, but no resource advantage there usually. But you can make this a bit better by having a bunch of like throwaway units that are mostly there for what they do, not for their stats, like random 1/1s and stuff, and then sort of cycle them with Cavalier, turning them into a removal. Also, because when Cavalier of Night dies, you get to return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, giving you some more utility out of said smaller, like enter the battlefield utility creatures that are cheap, because then you can get it back, get the effect again. So Cavalier kind of makes sure, more often than not, that it has something to get back when it dies, which is nice. All the Cavaliers look pretty good, so this is no exception. It's a bit more niche and a bit more specific, but still powerful nonetheless, and with the right deck construction this can definitely be a standard powerhouse as well. And in Limited, of course, this is an amazing first pick. Next we have Dredd Presents. It's a Hill Giant, it's a 4-cost 3/3, but it has a pretty powerful effect. Whenever a swamp enters the battlefield under your control, you either draw a card and lose a life, or Dredd Presence deals 2 damage to any target and you gain 2 life, which is super powerful. Like, I'm not sure if this is gonna be like quite interesting and good enough in Constructed, but even in Constructed, like, both effects are super powerful. The card is just a bit slow and a bit fragile, basically, to get value right away. It's a 5-drop. But yeah, in Limited, this is a monster. Like, the fact that the second part also targets creatures and planeswalkers, basically being like a better Sauron Thirst, is just amazing. and the first ability is just every swamp you draw, lets you draw cards. This is a big incentive to go heavy black or just even try to go mono black in limited, potentially. And yeah, it's quite the bomb. Next we have Embodiment of Agonies. This is a bit of an odd one. It's a 3-cost 0/0 flying Death Touch, and it gets +1/+1 counters for each different mana cost among non-land cards in your graveyard. That includes, for example, different color requirements, like not just casting cost ranges. Like if you have, as you can see in the explanation, a black 2 and a black 1 3-cost card, they both count. This doesn't seem particularly relevant for standard. Seems okay in limited potentially, because 3-cost flyers that maybe at some point are like 3/3 or 4/4 are pretty powerful. Death Touch doesn't hurt either. But this could be interesting in like older formats. Not sure if it's going to be quite good enough there, especially because it costs 3. But yeah, it can get pretty big pretty quickly with the right setup in older formats. Just not sure if it's going to be like quite appealing enough. But yeah, at least not a completely uninteresting, useless card. Something to keep in mind. Next we have Knight of the Ebon Legion, another amazing addition for said vampire deck. This card is just amazing for 1-drop. The 1-cost 1/2 for 3 mana. You can give it +3/+3 and Death Touch until end of turn, which is a pretty good rate and pretty powerful, turning it to a 4/5 Death Touch. And in addition, at the beginning of your end step, if a player lost 4 or more life this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Knight of the Ebon Legion, which obviously means it can activate it itself by pumping it, or just by having other creatures attack and then it grows out of hand quickly. This is a super powerful 1-drop that scales amazingly well. This this and Sauron have to make a vampire deck good enough, and I think we've already seen a vampire deck do fairly well by Oliver Tew, I think, in the mocks, so you can go and check that out if you want. And in limited, even in limited, this is a pretty great pick for sure. Next we have Legion's End, kind of an interesting removal here. It exiles a creature an opponent controls with cost 2 or less. It's a sorcery, so it's a bit inflexible here. But yeah, then it exiles all other creatures that player controls with the same name, and also exiles all other copies from their hand and graveyard, not from the deck though. So yeah, definitely an interesting card. Maybe a bit niche to play main deck, or at least multiples, but definitely a super powerful sideboard card against the right decks, potentially, so something to keep in mind here. Very restricted, but very brutal when effective. Next we have Leyline of the Void, not much to say here, not very relevant to standard, but very relevant to significantly lower modern prices, because Leyline of the Void has become ridiculously expensive as of late, and this is a much needed relief to that. Next we have Rotting Regisaur. This is kind of an interesting one. It's a dinosaur, so more tribal additions for Ixalan tribes before they rotate out. And yeah, it's a 3-cost 7/6, but at the beginning of your upkeep you have to discard a card. So yeah, not something you want to play in constructed. Opponent's just gonna wait till your upkeep, till you discard, and then use a removal spell on it. You can also not choose not to discard and just sack it. But that, on the other hand, has the upside that if you have no cards in hand anymore, that the Regisaur isn't dying, because, yeah, if you can't discard a card, you can't discard a card. But yeah, all in all, not a very constructed relevant card. In limited, also kind of like mixed feelings, but at least worth trying, because like a 3-cost 7/6 is pretty powerful in limited and might make up for the downside. But it is a high-risk card, so use with caution. And something that you at least want to board out if you see a lot of removal that can answer it from your opponent in game 1 in limited. Next we have Scheming Symmetry. basically a vampiric tutor that works for both players. But keep in mind the opponent is drawing their card first, so that's not quite symmetrical. It's basically like almost symmetrical, but at the but towards the advantage of your opponent. So that is one problem here. So yeah, the card is kind of odd, and there are probably some ways to break the symmetry. Like in Modern, for example, I can think of blue-black mill, just using this to like tutor archive trap or something like that, and then just use a mill effect on the opponent to mill whatever they tutored for. But the card might have other uses on how to break the symmetry and make it closer to a better vampiric tutor than it is now, but I'll leave that to other people to figure out. And in Limited, yeah, this doesn't seem very playable. And last but not least for part 1, we have Villis, Broker of Blood, kind of a similar card to Grizzlebrand in some way. It's an 8-cost, 8/8 flying. Whenever you lose life, you draw that many cards. That includes damage. And for 1 black, you can pay 2 life and give target creature -1/-1 until end of turn. So yeah, pretty powerful, but also very expensive. So outside of cheating it into play and Constructed, I don't think this is relevant at all. And in Limited, even in Limited, 8 is too much usually. So I doubt this is gonna be something that you usually gonna put in your Limited deck. Maybe there will be like some rare exceptions where it works out. Alright, that's it for the first part. I'll be back in a moment with part number 2, so stay tuned.